Good morning and welcome to episode 107 of the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap. Now, Graham, would you like to continue your wrap about how Trump is wonderful and how we all blame Elon Musk for everything?
Oh, don't start me. You know what? In this industry, one thing you have learned, Richard, is your opinion is always right 50% of the time. So we're not going to go down the particular pathway in case we might find somebody a bit more insensitive or a bit more sensitive than ourselves. But yes, I was having messenger issues this morning, so it must all be Elon's fault. Elon is controlling things from the planned 25 towers of Trump, who's already taken over the entire United States presidential machine, and he's screwing with the communications, and it all has to go through X now. That I know told me.
Have you guys been watching his appointments? They are hilarious.
Oh, yeah, he's trying it on. I was just going to say, Graham, have you got a website for that conspiracy theory? It sounds really quite fun.
Oh, which one? I'll just check for you, David.
Richard, appointments, yes. And I've got a gaggle of friends in the US that go right across the political spectrum that I talk to each day. And almost all of them are just laughing their pants off, saying he's just doing this to test loyalty and to muck everything up, just really throw it in the face of people. But I think there's a degree of seriousness by Trump in what he's doing. But one of them's already backed out, said I'm too much of a distraction. So
you mean he's too much under investigation for sexual assault?
Yeah, well,
distraction.
There is two sides to that story. When you read all of the press, which when it's not politicized, you get quite a different story. To
his colleagues started pulling out support of him because they were sick of the fact he was showing them pictures of the stuff he was doing.
Yeah. Well, there's two things there, Richard. He was having sex with people in pain for it, and that's what he was showing his colleagues, which is not a good look for a senator. And then there was the supposed inadvertently of somebody who was underage for Florida, because the age of consent is 18 and he was doing it with somebody from 17, but claims genuinely didn't know that and then stopped once he found out. And others have testified to that. But it's a messy look. And, we've had this sort of stuff in our own parliament. It is always a messy look when you get involved in stuff that is not considered becoming of a politician. Although the US is redefining what is becoming of a politician, and Trump leads the charge on that, and it's not really a good look.
Yeah, I think there's also a point there, David, that we're all looking at our machinery, if you like, of the public and the media together are all looking for the stories, and it doesn't matter which side of the spectrum you sit on. The Trump supporters will be saying that the machine's out to get them. That they're actually a pretty solid bunch, and it's just because the machinery of the media and the woke left doesn't like the new order that they're putting through and cleaning the place out. And the other side, Kamala's team or the Democrats, are saying that Trump's just pretty much the worst thing that ever happened since Marmite on Weet-Bix, and the world's going to actually implode in 5 days. You know what the truth of it is, I genuinely don't think at the moment anyone really has a true handle on how things are going to wash out in the next 3 or 4 weeks. What it is, though, fun is to sit back and watch, because that's actually all we can do. And I know it's a serious issue. A lot of these things going on probably do have an effect upon New Zealand, positive and negative, but there's nothing we can do about it. We're just bystanders. We've bought cheap seats.
And then I don't think the world's going to implode. I just find it a comedy show. I just find it amusing. I think anything's going to implode.
Yeah, and you already got those high-profile left-leaning people leaving the country, giving the finger to Trump, and others saying goodbye. But the interesting thing here is something that I think is interesting. Somebody from inside the Trump camp let loose with the media when they probably shouldn't have. And so the basic story to this particular journalist was the person who's the chief of staff for Trump now led the Trump campaign, and she held it together quite tightly, which when you compare previous campaigns, I'd have to say she did as tightly as you can with a man like Trump. But then the party started, and that's when all the trouble started. So Trump is now nominating people for positions that haven't been vetted by the team, and the vetting team is finding out when he's releasing the press statement. And so all bets are suddenly off in terms of how can you control that man. So yeah, it's a really interesting time, and it's easy for me to sit on the sidelines and have a bit of a chuckle. But I certainly hope it settles down, because we need the USA to be confident, and at the moment, I don't think they are. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. Now, of course, the important one for us is transportation. Who they're appointing as transportation secretary. Their transportation secretary is incredibly well qualified in that he was a cast member on the Real World and Real World Road Rules All Stars. Yes. In fairness, he is actually a relatively well experienced congressman, but still, I do find that amusing that seems to come up a lot in his.
Well, we had a bus driver as a finance minister, so
who's our bus driving finance minister, or who was?
Grant Robertson. He used to be a bus driver, didn't he?
Yeah,
he's got a few more qualifications than that, Graham.
It's semantics, Richard. And to be fair, let's just say that I think the US is probably about 3 or 4 elections behind New Zealand in terms of what used to be a train wreck of selection processes amongst our main parties. And I'm a former National Party operator myself, where the reality between the party and the selection process and the actual vetting of the candidates couldn't be further removed. And all the parties have either suffered from it in the past, or in possibly the case of the Greens recently, may still be suffering from it, where there's a total disconnect between the candidate and what the candidate actually looks and smells like when they're elected. We've, I think, got better at it, and I think the main parties, certainly National and Labour, I think, got a lot better at it over the last few years. I mean, I know within National there's a really robust selection process now. You can still get it wrong, but there's a whole lot more checks and balances. The US, I think, is that number of cycles behind working out you actually have to go through a really rigorous vetting process before you stand people up like a piece of cardboard and say, here they are.
It's partly because they're a flawed democracy in the way in which their democratic processes are structured. And so there's an inherent challenge there. But Richard, I'm going to come back, pick you up on that statement about the person appointed in charge of transport. How many transport ministers in New Zealand have had a background in transport? I think we'd find about 9 out of 10 don't.
Yes,
So,
but keep in mind, these aren't transport ministers. These aren't elected officials that are there to act in a political position from this point. These guys are secretaries. They are essentially politically appointed CEOs of these organisations. They're not elected officials to... Yeah.
I understand the process really well. So secretaries and undersecretaries are all up for grabs if the president so wishes to. Mm-hmm. So then I come back to my second point, Richard, which is when you look at the CEOs of government departments, again, look at how many don't or didn't have a transport background. And a lot of them didn't. I worked for some who did and some who did not. So it all comes down to the leadership qualities and the vision and what they want to do with it. So I don't think necessarily not having a transport background is an issue.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you on that. I think good management is good management. The question is whether they are hiring good managers is the point, or whether we're talking about jobs for friends or wanting to be... I think the issue is wanting to be different at times unnecessarily. I guess is the point.
And that is the big challenge this time round. Yes, there is the distinct trend, I would argue, of loyalty, and some people use the term fealty. And you go down that line too far, then it just becomes pork barrel politics, which is why, again, in America, pork barrel politics is a part of their flawed democracy system, and it's always a risk.
Yeah. I mean, look at education. He's appointed the wife of the head of WWE. Her job for the last whatever number of years has been co-founder of the WWE. I'm not sure how that ties into good governance with education. But anyway.
It's always a bit of a wrangle and wrestle in education, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm glad my
Just
kids aren't going to school.
Waiting
Let's
for
put it
that.
way. Yeah. Look, that's enough American politics for today. I'm sure we'll come back to Elon and what's going on with EV subsidies and all that kind of stuff over there at some point. But I'm going to freeze this. I've got to stop my camera moving around. It keeps on deciding.
While you're doing that, let me just make one comment about Musk, and I'm going to be quite careful about how I say it, but I fear this. I'm concerned. Musk has said that regulation gets in the way of him selling cars and making rockets. And I think what he's concerned about is regulation getting in the way of his fully autonomous vehicles, which aren't fully autonomous and keep crashing and killing people. So I'd be really worried if he untangles that nest bed of issues there in his favour and not in the favour of the owner of the vehicle. That would be my concern.
Yes, yes. Well, we'll see what he does there. But it's been quite the week. Quite the week. We put out AutoTalk on Friday, and then we posted afterward one of the stories from that magazine. And that story has not stopped developing, so expect next week another layer on this story. Now, anyone who says the S word ending with a T during this piece, you've got to go and donate $10 to charity somewhere. Probably the Victims of Trump Fund. Dealer sends feces images as business enters receivership. This is a wild, wild story.
It's actually about as wild as it gets if you read through it. I can't think of many stories we've covered in my time in the trade that have been as, I'm not going to use the words outrageous because we sort of say it with a degree of a wry smile, but just completely unhinged stories.
So we're gonna this is a story online. We're gonna click over to read the story within the magazine because I think that's the best place to do that. My computer's gonna freeze up here for a second.
It's one of those paraphrase the good bits type deals, isn't it? Where there's just so much to digest if you haven't already read the story in the magazine or online, that it is a good one.
So I think we're gonna have to do a read through as a group here on this one. Obviously, great magazine. If you haven't already downloaded, this is just one of our crackers. We're miles ahead of everyone else in this. I think some really great content in there. But anyway, let's go through to the story. So, Christchurch used car dealership IC Cars have been placed in receivership amidst multiple legal issues and debts. And I want to make this clear to everyone. We would never normally do a story like this around a receivership or a liquidation. Businesses fail. That is what the system is for. There are unfortunate reasons behind that. And even in this case, it's not really what the criticism is. I want to make that really clear. However, the yard, which operated until late last week or the week before now, on the city centre site, was owned and managed by Christopher Schwartz. IC Cars appeared to be a successful business with strong reviews on Facebook, Google, and BuyerScore. Earlier this week, its website went offline. The yard is reporting now vacant, with the receivers appointed at the request of financier FundTap. AutoTalk became aware of emerging issues at IC Cars around 3 weeks ago when a member of the public, acting on behalf of a friend, raised concerns about the suspicious sale of a Cherry J1. The car lacked a warrant of fitness and no documentation was supplied. Now, the interesting timing with that was that came actually on the day of AutoTalk Live Christchurch. Graham and I were looking at the notes on this on the way out to the airport. The people...
Richard, do you remember, if we go any further on that story, you remember you and I were debating this in the airport lounge as the story broke about whether this was a legitimate case of just two parties having a bad day and there was some middle ground there somewhere and the dealer was possibly hadn't quite done the right thing, but he wasn't sure if he'd done the right thing, and now he was lashing back a little bit, but the public member was being a little bit facetious about it too. Bad pun. But we were unsure about just how far this would go. Oh, what we didn't know on that particular evening at the airport. What we didn't know.
Yes. Well, the interesting thing about that was that this dealership, this dealer principal and his contractor working there is kind of two I see at the site, were going to be at AutoTalk Live. And the reason they were going to be at AutoTalk Live is the week before we gave away 2 tickets from this live stream. They won the tickets.
Well,
the
I'm
irony.
not casting dispersions on the people that watch this stream, but just saying. Anyway,
But this is what went wrong. They failed to attend to get some top tips on how to manage a potentially difficult situation and conflict. They could have had it all sorted. Stephen Timberley would have, in his first presentation, Deloitte would have had all the answers for them. Would have left the left AutoTalk live halfway through and gone, "Hang on a minute, we just forgot about doing this." Buggered off, sorted the whole problem out. That's what was missing.
so in a long email exchange, Schwartz reportedly denied selling the vehicle, ultimately sending the complainant a photo of feces in a toilet. I've seen the picture.
Poo in a toilet. Poo in a toilet.
That was toilets, car doors, pizza boxes. It's all over the place. There's feces everywhere. The saga ended up on Reddit, a popular internet forum. Upon Schwartz discovering the post, Schwartz threatened legal action against the user who reposted it. This is not the first time Schwartz has allegedly shared inappropriate images. And a lot of this started to come out of the woodwork as we dug. In another dispute, CO2X, a carbon credits trader, claimed Schwartz agreed to sell credits to the company, received payment, and then delayed and refused to transfer the credits. Andrew Casson of CO2X alleges that Schwartz acted erratically, calling late at night, proposing double or nothing on the debt, and offering cannabis as part payment. Casson provided AutoTalk with evidence of images sent by Schwartz, including feces in a pizza box, and a picture of a naked male. The images coming through took it to a new level, Casson says. Casson went public with a warning to others about dealing with Schwartz. Another concerning incident also recently came to light. A motor vehicle disputes tribunal hearing held on October 10 without Schwartz present found that IC Cars had failed to refund customers for a faulty vehicle, despite the importer taking it back for repair and providing the refund to the dealership. So he sold a car, it was never delivered because it was faulty. The customer requested a refund, he denied them. The importer said a refund should be fine. They took the car back, paid the dealer for the car. The dealer never repaid the money. So the finance company that lent the money on the car has paid him the money. The
wholesalers give him the money. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And the customer has no car. They were paying payments on the car, etc., etc. Faults were discovered within a Nissan Skyline during the pre-purchase inspection, preventing the vehicle from being registered. After a month, that appears the customer rejected the vehicle, and the finance company Onyx also requested a refund. Schwartz refused to accept the cancellation and told the customer they would need to wait for repairs. He later offered to swap the vehicle, but reneged, literally after the person had been to the yard to do it. Further negotiation failed, leading to the claim. And he played around. He denied an in-person hearing, but this was declined. He requested an in-person hearing, this was declined. As he stated, he would be in Japan until mid-December. He also suggested he was looking to liquidate the company to make the claim go away. Just a heads up, I'm looking at liquidation of IC Cars. I will be naming Janus as an unsecured creditor. This will wipe this debt and our liability entirely. When asked if this email was meant for him, Schwartz replied to the customer, technical terms, yes. I'm sorry, an unfortunate situation for you. Hopefully you understand. Just enjoy paying the debt. The customer contacted the finance company, which discovered a second secure interest in the car held by AutoFleet Capital, who were the company that had taken back the car and paid for it. AutoFleet has told us that they actually confirmed that Schwartz was not out of the country as he claimed, so essentially lying to the tribunal about his location. An urgent hearing was ordered. Schwartz refused to take part in a test call, citing technical issues. So to be blunt, they went away and did it without him. And then on the day, he asked for another hearing, and they were like, yeah, nah. So yes, that customer had also received images of feces and other items. Furthermore, after the hearing, Mr. Schwartz sent an email to Mr. Cilliers, which was forwarded to the tribunal. This email contained 2 attachments with highly objectionable content. I'm unsure what prompted such an action from Schwartz, but this certainly raises questions about his suitability to be a motor vehicle trader. However, this decision is better suited for the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment and the Commerce Commission. We've spoken to a former contractor who's been left out of pocket as well. Now, since that story went to press, we have had multiple other tracts of information come in that we are still working through, and we have to be cautious. So be careful what you jump in on, guys, in regards to this. We are aware now that there was a previous business failing with similar aspects to it. We have had allegations from a dealer that also works for AutoFleet Capital, that Schwartz has been registering or claiming ownership of his personal drive vehicle and other vehicles on another dealership, putting them into the name of a staff member of IC Cars, and then putting PPSR registrations against those vehicles. So there's questions around A, those actions, but B, how easy it is to claim ownership of a vehicle or register a vehicle. I know ownership and registration aren't the same thing. And then we've heard of and seen other cases of people receiving images of feces and questionable images. We put this out to the public as well through our autocar.co.nz site. If you don't go to Autocar often, then please do go check that out. Very good site, if I may say so myself. And we have had, again, more claims of people affected by IC Cars or by Chris Schwartz specifically, posted up on there. And even to the point where a woman alleging to be his daughter says she's only just become aware of the case and is disgusted by it. So yeah, it's quite the mess, literally.
It's a meltdown, absolute meltdown, isn't it? One of the really interesting aspects is that if you look at the reviews, and we put a lot of stock as dealerships, I think a lot of dealers do. That's reviews these days, Google, buy score, things like that. They've sort of become a really important part of your marketing. If you look at IC Cars ratings on Google and on buy score, they're really good. And so it appears on the outside anyway as if this was a really well-regarded, trusted dealership in Christchurch, right through to, if you look at the review dates, into October. It almost like things just went spectacularly wrong very quickly, like a spiral. And we would have thought that the cracks would be appearing on a public basis in sort of those reviews a lot sooner than they actually did.
Yeah. This has got to be headed for a ban. I mean, it's been referred to the Commerce Commission and the registrar. He's got to be headed for a ban. So it'd be interesting to see whether that's the last we hear of Christopher Schwartz in the car industry. I doubt it. David, what's the thinking behind the ability to re-register a car in your own name being so easy? I mean, I did it, changed the ownership of my mother-in-law the other day, and it took me about 2 minutes without even a credit card online. I mean, any thoughts onto why that is so easy? Is it too easy to re-register a vehicle?
Well, normally it's two parties to re-register a vehicle. The person who's the current registered owner, but then the policy over the years, and I recall this discussion as early as about 2005 when I had just joined the Ministry of Transport, asking similar questions. And the standard answer then remains the standard answer now, and you've touched on it, in that the MVR, or the registered, the registration, the name on the registration for a vehicle is not the same as the owner. Then the question becomes well, then how can you prove ownership? And that conundrum has never gone away. And a lot of people think that being the registered owner says that you are the registered name over a vehicle. That means you're the owner of the vehicle. All it means is that you are liable for the insurance costs that would be involved in an accident. You're liable for any penalties and fines. You're liable for all that sort of stuff. It does not confirm ownership. It implies ownership, and therein lies the problem. And you're right, it is easy to change.
But it does in essence, doesn't it, though? Because you can go and write a loan against a car if it's in your name.
No, well, that is a property right rather than an ownership right. Yeah, it's weird.
You got a thought on that one?
If you're talking about re-registering a vehicle, guys, or changing the ownership,
changing of ownership.
Very different. Very different. Change of ownership in the public spectrum, anyway. The two-party approach to it still stands, as far as I understand it.
Yeah, it does.
Difference being as traders. So assuming this is one again.
So my understanding of the practice now is not that it stands. It's that now if you go online, you can change ownership. You need to change ownership as a new ownership without paying a fee. You go in, you fill in some details, push a button.
Mm-hmm.
The previous owner is informed. But unless they intervene, then it's just that one person policy. And apparently once that is actually first thing done, the actual intervening process is actually quite difficult and delayed, and it still registers a change of ownership on the vehicle's record.
No,
there's
the
old paper process used to as well. It was just a different. So there was as I understand it, and David, stop me if I'm wrong here, but under the old paper-based process where you had the two forms submitted, one effectively was the master form, if you like, which spiked the transaction to occur, but it required the second form to be received by the, I can't remember, it was the buyer or the seller now, to, if you like, to ratify that transaction. But the transaction itself actually took place on the basis of the first form. That's been taken through in a digital sense now, where, as Richard, as you say, one person can complete that transaction online, but technically all it does is it sends out a trigger, if you like, to the previous registered, if you like, the keeper, as the British would call it, the keeper of the vehicle, and which is an interesting term when you think about it, the keeper, not the owner, but the keeper. And if they don't raise an issue with that, the transaction is considered complete. But
well, I
the
have experiences
other
on
way
that.
of looking at it is the American system of titling. We're talking about America today. And if we say, well, okay, is our system here not robust enough? We go back to the Americans who do actually have a title system on motor vehicles. Let's not go there, because that is just such a horrifically complicated and difficult and unwieldy and frequently bastard of a system to work the way through when it comes to titles and lost titles and assigned titles and what that means. And that ties up
unclear titles. Yeah.
Yep.
Should we try it here while we're online, Graham? Have you got an old beta sitting somewhere that I can claim ownership of?
Well, just a minute, Richard.
I've got a great little Festiva you could have. Actually got a truck now too, Richard, but I just did that one yesterday. So
No, I'm
I'm
serious.
never
We can sit here and do it online while we're on the thing, and we'll see what happens.
The challenge is, I've done this. The last motorbike I sold, I filled in the change of ownership, and the dealer who I'd sold it to did not fill it in their end. And for months afterwards, I was receiving information and advice. So, it doesn't actually work the way it's meant to work. So, when you are selling, my understanding is it still requires both the seller and the purchaser to complete the process before the transaction is confirmed in the MVR, not one or the other. It's got to be both. But I could be wrong on that.
Message me the number plate on the Festiva, Graham, and we'll see what happens.
No, I want to keep it in my name, thank you.
Yeah. You can transfer it back.
Well, this wouldn't show a trail of 7 years in my ownership, would it?
It's probably an interesting question to throw to the Director of Land Transport at the NZTA to see what the official response is.
We will be, but everything we're hearing, and I've seen this kind of situation before. It seems a lot easier than I think some people realize it is. There's something odd going on there. But yeah. Anyway, so that's the case. So expect more from that. If you're watching Chris Schwartz, which you could well be, because you have a habit of doing random things and emailing me at 3 a.m. from random names and different addresses. Hello, please stop sending pictures of poo. Please.
Not helping your case.
It is certainly odd behaviour, and it is unbecoming behaviour of a dealer principal. And I think that's the important point here: is what is the behaviour? What are the reasons for the behaviour? What's acceptable and what's not acceptable? And I think it's pretty clear in this case what is not acceptable.
There's a bigger issue at play for me. So I say for my end of the business between the three of us here. So if you look at me, and I'm in the retail space. There's a lot of dealers that I've spoken to are really angry about this, because it's God only knows we don't need negative publicity around car dealers at any given time. But it's just one more thing that people say, oh, well, I know you bloody car dealers. I heard about this guy down somewhere. He's sending out pictures of poo and he's not paying for cars. He's not, you car dealers. We don't need any more negative publicity about how the 98 or 99% of the industry are actually doing the very best to maintain a really good and open and honest business. But it's always those little stories that pop up, the 1% that just stuff it up in terms of the public's perception of what a motor vehicle trader is.
Bad stories stick.
It's so many aspects. Hang on, we've got hang on.
Oh, is there breaking news, Richard? Richard's looking very interested right now. We'll just talk amongst ourselves here.
Yeah, hold the line there, guys.
Okay. While you're doing that, Richard, I'll tell a little story. We're talking about motor vehicle traders doing the right thing. Remember a couple of years ago, David, if you might recall, I was having some issues with trying to buy a New Zealand new vehicle from a motor vehicle very well-known franchise dealership, and it went horribly wrong in terms of how I was treated. It was resolved, but I've got a good friend of mine who went to this is another franchise dealership story. I'm not saying it should be about franchise dealers, as the used vehicle trade is just as shocking when it wants to be, but a well-heeled, moneyed friend of mine, middle-aged man, same age as me, well-presented, went to a very well-known franchise dealership to purchase a new motor vehicle, money in hand, ready to go, wanted to buy a brand new motor vehicle, and they wouldn't give him the time of day. They were too busy. He couldn't get anyone to talk to him. In his words, he said, they just all treated me as if they had better things to do. And I felt like I was, he said, buying a toaster rather than a car. And he came to me and said, look, do you have any tips or tricks or recommendations? I don't really want to give them my money. I just feel like I'm bothering them. So two parts to that. First of all, I sent him off to another dealer who specializes in the same product, and he's had nothing but an absolute Rolls-Royce experience of vehicle purchasing. He could not be happier. And the team, if they're watching this, and
the person I directed them to, Graham, or did someone else pick them up?
Let's just not go into the details there, Richard, but let's just say there's been some assistance from some members of the Auto Media Group team. And he said a Rolls-Royce experience, he could not be happier. He said, man, that is just amazing. But the other point I was going to make was, yes, again, what does it take in a business of these sort of sizes to actually just have a bit of customer service on your team?
Look, we won't name them again, but we've discussed this.
Oh, no. Well,
I had the same issue. I had an issue with that dealership. I moved to the dealership that you've discussed, and had a great experience. You had similar issues. I've heard of it before. The distributor, the head of the distributor, the former head of the distributor that we're talking about here, they're very aware of the issues. Why it can't be solved is beyond me.
Well, they lost the sale. End of.
I carried out an experiment maybe about 9 years ago. Yes, I was in the role of with the MIA at the time. And I dressed up in pretty shoddy sort of garden clothes and stuff, and went to a couple of car yards out of town, not in Lower Hutt. I went somewhere else, and it's just amazing the preconceptions, the profiling that people on car yards do. So it's I think there's just something inherently wrong with the way in which the sales incentives are made. If they don't think they're going to get a sale from you, they won't show you the time of day. Conversely, I've been on some car yards and some dealers, both used and new. And the moment you walked on, you were hassled in terms of buying a car, and I think either extreme is bad. I'd like to go on and have a look around, and then if I'm poking up and having a look and sort of waving my hand, then I expect somebody to say, oh yeah, that person's now interested, let's go and have a chat. So yeah, there are extremes, and poor salesmanship for cars is not unique to new or used. It seems to be that there's a core of bad element in both. And I think it's probably a little bit around how the incentivization works, what sort of day somebody's having, who they perceive to be their customers and not their customers, etc. It's really interesting if you go dressed up in baggy old clothes and go to an upmarket car dealership. They often can't get you out the door quick enough. So the preconceptions are not always right.
So the thing I was jumping across is that the receivers have exited IC cars because there ain't no money there. I think there was the company that put into receivership was over a debt of $11,500, and the receivers have realised there's nothing in there. It seems to be like a bit of a managed exit by Mr. Schwartz. He's obviously
moved things around and out.
Nothing in the bank. So yeah.
Of course, we're not suggesting on the show here this is the case. that we often hear stories within the industry of, shall we say, trading insolvent. And I'm not making any suggestion this would be the case here, but that's a little bit different from just shutting the doors of a business when it's going under and things are tough, to actually being insolvent and trading insolvent for quite some time. And again, I'm making no reference or connection.
Look,
we
don't know in this case, Graham, because I'm aware that some of the vehicle suppliers got their vehicles out and aren't left holding the bag. So perhaps it was a little more equal all round, but it suggests more to me that that the reason for potentially wanting to close it down was maybe to get away from claims. Who knows? Well, it was a receivership, so they were appointed by the debtor. So we don't know. Let's be careful on this one.
It's just a messy situation all round.
Yes, let's move on at 35 minutes into the stream and try and actually get through the other news this week. Trump and one dealer, 35 minutes. Anyway, Zika. Maybe we haven't done the story before in here, have we? No.
We have. We've talked about Zika. We've talked about the imminent arrival of Zika, but we haven't put a timeline on it.
Yes. So I bumped into the managing director of Zika Australia New Zealand in Sydney a couple of weeks back, and they are going to be here by the end of the year. So that's yet another brand. Well, they're trying by the end of the year. I suspect to be early next year. Another brand coming into New Zealand, alongside like 2 or 3 others we're going to mention today, and a whole pile more. So yeah, interesting to see they come in. They haven't appointed a distributor yet, or at least they hadn't when I spoke to them. Giltrap Group, Auto Distributors, and Atico were names that are floating around in regards to Zika. Be interesting to see if it could go to the Giltrap Group, because they already have Polestar, which is a sister brand, and they have just this week signed Geely, which we'll talk more about shortly. But interesting to see them arriving. Yeah, Giltrap grabs Geely for New Zealand. Geely Auto has appointed the Giltrap Group as its official distributor for the automotive brand in New Zealand. Evan Yee, Deputy General Manager of Geely Auto International Corporation, Lee, CEO of Geely Auto Australia, and Michael Giltrap, Joint Managing Director of Giltrap Group, signed the new distribution agreement in Sydney. New Zealand is crucial to our global ambition, and we're excited to strengthen our presence here. The alliance we've established with Giltrap Group will be pivotal to Geely's sustained growth and reputation in the region. The Geely EX5, a mid-sized electric vehicle and the first model to enter the New Zealand market, was showcased at the ceremony. The EX5 is slated for launch in 2025. Yes, the Giltrap already has Volvo, Polestar, and Lotus, which are also owned by Geely. Now, a lot of brands are going to come and go. This is going to be a big one, I think. Geely is one of the big brands in China. It looks set to be one of the big pushes globally. So it's going to be really interesting to see what they can do here. And I'm sure that is a really big win for Giltrap getting that brand.
It's a substantial company on a worldwide scale. And it's not a company that once they make a decision to enter a market will go away from that market easily. The market would have to collapse. And you're right, the number of entrants that have been announced means the slice of the pizza is inevitably getting smaller, and we're starting to see new vehicle distributors getting a lot more picky and choosy about which models they bring and the reduced number of model variants. So they're starting to be very picky about the type of vehicles that they're bringing in. Because it's hard to compete with good value Chinese vehicles that have got a price advantage over European or Japanese vehicles.
Yeah, and look, the other aspect to all this is that Geely is kind of it's going to be the most mainstream brand, I think, that the Giltrap Group has. And watch the space, I would say 2026, maybe 2027 at a push, Geely will be the biggest volume brand that the Giltrap Group sells in New Zealand as far as a distributorship level. Think that's good money placed there, David?
Exceptionally smart move by Giltraps. It's something I would have expected from them. And I would guess they've been working away at this for quite some time. It helps, of course, that they've got already a gaggle of Geely brands within the market.
Geelys. Yeah.
Oh, no, I can't help it.
Now, it's not the first time they've launched Geelys in New Zealand. They had their New World Motors subsidiary many years ago, and they brought in the Geely Panda and I I can't remember the name of the hatch. They were appalling. They were awful cars. But Geely is a very different machine now to what it was back then. Very different.
Back then, they were in the infancy of manufacturing vehicles. A lot has changed since then, and China has developed their internal market, which is significant given their population, and have been focusing on now, how do we now get our homologation processes in place so that we can put them into the European, the North American, Japanese, and Oceania markets. That's what they've been looking at. And that they have bought other brands that were traditionally European brands means that they are well placed and well respected, and are probably more respected as a Chinese brand than some of the others. So good on Gultrap for getting that signed, sealed, and delivered. It's going to be a big one.
Now, speaking of another brand coming in, ADNZ confirms initial Leapmotor dealership network. Now, you see that car there? I've been driving that car this week. That car is what price parity looks like. That is the Leapmotor C10. It's an SUV about the size of a Mitsubishi Outlander. It doesn't look it, but those wheels are actually 20-inch wheels, which kind of warp your size perception of the car. So, a medium to large-ish SUV, 68 kilowatt hour battery, good performance, amazing spec, really nice interior, 54,990, and that's list price, not kind of a special clear out price like we're seeing on a lot of electric vehicles at the moment. So this is from Leapmotor, which has a global tie-up with Stellantis that's come here through Auto Distributors New Zealand, who also distribute, of course, Peugeot and Citroen. So the Stellantis Leapmotor joint venture, Leapmotor International, has appointed Auto Distributors New Zealand Limited as owned by automotive magnate Rick Armstrong, as the official importer of the Leapmotor C10 brand. The Chinese vehicles will be available from January from 54,990. They're going to be sold out of the Armstrong dealers in Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch. They're going to expand through the country. They've got more models coming. They've got a large SUV. They've got plug-in hybrid versions of both that car and the large SUV coming. Leapmotor's an interesting one. I wasn't expecting much from Leapmotor till I saw the price and drove the car. And it's going to be interesting what they can do with that brand. And again, and someone with an ADNZ confirmed this to me or agreed with me on this, that will be the best-selling Stellantis product group within New Zealand next year. That will outsell Jeep, that'll outsell Citroen, that'll outsell Peugeot, Opel, the lot. The price...
Wouldn't be hard to outsell Citroen. They did two last month.
I know.
Whose lunch are they going to... Richard, whose lunch they're going to cut? Whose lunch they're going to cut? I asked this question on the show all the time because I know we don't like to talk about this sort of stuff, but how many more brands are we going to see coming in, and how many more slices of the pie we're going to keep dividing up smaller and smaller and smaller? And the attrition rate at some point in time, the attrition has to start occurring across these brands. There are just so many.
I think it's the middle run Japanese stuff that's going to get hurt by these kind of things. The people who I know who are buying BYD have previously generally bought Nissan, Mazda, that kind of thing. They are people who are used to pretty run-of-the-middle of the market stuff. The only thing that Leapmotor I think has gotten wrong, and I've said this to the team there, is that they've only got a 4-year, 100,000 kilometer warranty. I'm a 2-time Chinese EV buyer now, and half the reason I buy them is for the ludicrously long warranties. And I think they're aware of that, and it's something they're going to look at. But I think it's that middle market there that hurts.
Yeah, not all of the new entrants, I think, will survive, and not all of the existing market participants will survive. I think it's probably the safest way of answering that question. But when you look at what some of the Japanese are doing, for example, Mazda, they've withdrawn their Ute, and that's partly CCS related, I think, as well. But it was not selling in big numbers. And when you bring in a vehicle, the overheads for a model are particularly high in terms of parts and warranties and stuff like that. So Mazda, for example, has decided it's going to go and try and be a little bit more upmarket. So in upmarket, you have slightly bigger margins, you can sell less volume. but some of the other Japanese players aren't. And so it'll be interesting to see how the likes of the Suzuki survive. Because a lot of these Chinese vehicles are going to start instilling that from there. So Suzuki with the Jimmy have a cult market for that sort of brand. But there are other vehicles, if they don't go down the electrification pathway, and by that I mean strong hybrid to plug-in hybrid, then they might stand to lose out. So it's going to be an interesting time. It's hard to predict what will happen. And of course, I don't know what each of the new vehicle OEMs are planning, what their timelines are. But you're right, Graham, the number of models, number of brands, and then models per brands in New Zealand for a head of population. And that we're so far away from where all of these vehicles are manufactured. So you've got all of the extra distribution costs associated with that. It doesn't make sense. Or if it doesn't make sense, we'll be paying more than what we would otherwise ought to. So either the prices go up or we start seeing rationalisation there. That's the word I was searching for.
Yeah. I think we're going to see some rationalisation, definitely. And you're right. Not all these brands are going to survive. And I think that's a global thing, not just a New Zealand thing as well. I mean, you look at Geely, like half a dozen brands, and I think at least 3 or 4 of them are going to be here. Well, is that going to make sense long term? So, yeah.
So from a member of the public's perspective, and here's the issue for the trades to try and work its way through, is if we do start to see that rationalisation. So if I was a car buyer right now looking to see where I'm going to spend my money, and I am looking at things like not just warranties, because warranties are all very well, but I'm saying to myself, are they going to be there in 4 or 5 years for me to A, get parts and service and the things that I need, and B, is there going to be any residual trade-in value for this thing if my supplier is no longer in business or no longer in New Zealand? And so I think there's a really difficult message for the trade, particularly in the newer entrants, to work through as to how you give the public confidence that the product's going to be there in 5 years with the support that it needs and the resale that it needs. Because if you ain't in the market anymore, we saw what happened with the residual price on a lot of the Holden stuff once Holden exited the market, is it just plummeted because people no longer had the confidence, even if that was misplaced, that the service and the parts and the framework around the product will be there when it came time to trade in. So it's a difficult
about
one.
that too, as it also came off the back of a pretty piss poor period for Commodore, for Holden product outside of Commodore. There's another reason why there's Commodore Colorado.
Taking your analogy, Richard, we're coming through a pretty piss poor period of vehicle sales full stop right now. So I wouldn't exactly say we're farting unicorns and roses out there either.
But just going back to the Holden, the GM one, they did say they would have parts and warranties for 10 years. But of course, vehicles last a lot longer than 10 years. What happens after that?
I challenge you on that one, David.
Graham, I can still get parts for my Colorado. Thank you very much.
That's one of the ones you possibly can. Let's just say.
Yes. Right, now we have like 10 stories to go, guys. We're gonna blast through it. No more than like 90 seconds of story, okay? So jump in if you have to, but be aware. We're gonna fly. So
just the headlines.
Despite volatile market, Too Cheap Cars declares interim dividend. In spite of the volatile automotive market impacting its half-year profit, Too Cheap Cars Group has declared an interim dividend. It reported a net profit after tax of $1.67 million for the half-year ended September 30, down from $3.2 million in the half-year 24. Vehicle sales of 4,119 units were up 9% in the previous period, while revenue and income remained steady at $41.98 million. The group says these results highlight New Zealand's prolonged economic downturn and the consequent challenges the automotive retail market faces. Revenue and income remained steady, although a general decline in consumer spending and intensified competition within the used vehicle sector put pressure on margins and impacted profitabilities. Shifting customer demographics and preferences have also affected finance and insurance penetration rates. You mean people were struggling to get finance. Anyway, so yes, so that's tracking along there. Feels like they're selling less cars at a higher price, would be my read on it, which is kind of, I guess, where everyone's at the moment. The cheapies don't necessarily fall out of the sky like they used to. So
can't buy them. When you get them here, you can't apply them. Don't forget there's been some significant changes to the import marketplace over this last year when it comes to The profile, the emissions profile of the vehicles we're purchasing, and also the CCS effect, I guess. It makes it a lot more difficult to obtain stock that you can actually make work. Coupled with a flat market is the most polite way I can put it.
Finalists announced for the 2024 New Zealand Car of the Year. This is the award run by the New Zealand Motoring Riders Guild. The finalists this year are the Honda CR-V, Hyundai Santa Fe, Kia EV9, Mercedes-Benz E-Class, MG3, Polestar 4, Suzuki Swift, Subaru Solterra, Toyota CHR, Toyota BZ4X, and the Volvo EX30. You'll notice there's 11 cars there, not the normal 10. That's because they've included both the Subaru Solterra and the Toyota BZ4X because they're pretty darn similar. Interesting top 11 there. I do not agree with it, but I no longer run that award, so it's no longer my problem. There's some very worthy cars there. Very worthy cars there. And
I felt a little underwhelmed when I read that list.
There are some weird emissions from that group this year, and who knows. Anyway, keep my opinions to that on myself. To myself. And I should declare, of course, that I now am the owner of Autocar, and so we run one of the other major awards. And yeah, vehicle spending down $1.8 million in October. Retail spending on motor vehicles, excluding fuel, was down 1.8 million, 0.9% month on month in October. The industry seasonally adjusted total for the month was 186 million, according to Stats NZ, and matches August 2024 as the second lowest spending month recorded in the industry over the last 2 years. Are you surprised?
No shit, Sherlock.
Are you surprised it's not lower?
Here's my $10 the swear jar too.
Yeah. I thought that was not a bad result given the environment.
Government earns a pass from the MTA. Progress on roads of national security, immigration and clean car standards has earned the government a pass in the Motor Trade Association's annual warrant of fitness check. The government also earns passes for action to ease the driver licence testing backlog and increasing fees for tow truck operators. MTA Chief Executive Lee Marshall says the government has moved quickly and positively in some key areas affecting the automotive and transport sectors in its first year. Much of the policy change that MTA called for before the election has been actioned. The government promised to roll up its sleeves and address a number of key areas and deserves credit for doing so. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being top, 1 being bottom, rate the government for the last year on transport. Graham, go.
7.
David?
Yeah, 7. Can I just comment the one big thing that is not being actioned, and which I know the MTA is also strong on, is industry education, the training organisation structure. That's just a mess, and at long term we're going to pay for that.
I'm going to give them a 7 with an asterisk, and that asterisk is that the time for very rushed and not necessarily fully thought through or detailed transport regulation is over. We now need to see some fine-tuning and some more slowly walk through pragmatic moves come over the rest of their term. That's my 7 with an asterisk. Don't know whether anyone agrees with that one. Right, Auckland City Twitter GM celebrates 10-year milestone. Auckland City Twitter General Manager Shay Wright has been recognised by Armstrongs and Twitter New Zealand for his 10 years of service to the dealership group. During the past decade, Wright has served as General Manager for 2 Auckland City Twitter dealerships and recently stepped up as acting Chief Executive for the group. Shay's dedication to the Twitter brand shines through in everything he does. His personable nature, reliability and commitment have made a long-lasting impact on our team and customers, Armstrong says. So there you go. Good work from him. Ford Ranger Super Duty set to launch in 2026. Everyone's talking about electric pickup trucks and CO2. Ford says, hold my 4X, and says they're going to launch a bigger Ranger that will carry more, but probably use a bit more juice in the process. It will be arriving in 2026. It's being produced in collaboration with fleet customers. The vehicle has been engineered and designed to deliver high levels of gross vehicle mass, gross combined mass, and towing and enhanced off-road capability. This includes 4,500 kg maximum brake towing capacity, 4,500 kg GVM, and an 8,000 kilogram GCM. Its target market is emergency service operators, farmers, utilities and forestry workers, miners, infrastructure technicians, and more. But we all know that at least half the buyers are going to be accountants based in Glenfield who just want to look tough in the car park.
That was just written by the PR people. We all know. Well, I say forget the accountants from Glenfield. It's going to be half of West Auckland out here. Any tradie worth his salt who owns his own engineering, electrical, plumbing business is going to have one of those. Yeah, good on you, Ford. Thank you very much.
I think their target market is not New Zealand as such; it's Australia, and Australia have been soaking up these sorts of vehicles quite a lot recently.
Yes.
Well, they've been caught short of it, haven't they? By just the meteoric sales of things like the Ram and the Silverado. I think Ford have been going, oops, missed a gap there in the market lineup in Australia, haven't they?
Yeah, and Toyota are doing the left to right. Right to left. Left to right.
And Ford are with the F-150 as well, but they're not. They're now being criticised a lot in Australia. Those big American trucks as not really being appropriate. The specs that are coming in and being set up for conversion don't necessarily really work to be that much more capable than actually a lot of these pickup trucks. They have sometimes some very low payloads and that kind of stuff. And what the fleets are being forced into for appropriate vehicles is things like GVM upgraded LC70s. So it's actually that market that they're chasing. It's not, part of it is they're competing with those bigger American trucks, but what they're trying to do, I think, is offer a more appropriate tool for Australia and also give fleets an option that's not, the LC70 is a capable workhorse, but it's not the nicest thing to drive around in, and you're still having to do an aftermarket GVM upgrade to make it work. So I think what they're doing is building a Ranger that can compete in that space. This is a concept done by Alex Schultz, our very capable designer over at AutoTalk. Just a bit of a beefier Ranger, though I think most of them are going to be, they're going to look like that. I think Ford thinks they're all going to be steel deck workhorses, but no, that's going to be it.
But they ain't going to look like that for long either. There's the aftermarket guys already getting that image there, and they've re-stenciled it. There's been different wheels, step sides, bull bars, chrome kits. Yeah. Just about got Casey lights on the roof. That's just a start.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, Richard, I was interested to read what Toyota are doing with their big truck. They are not rushing it to the market. They are doing that work around the suspension, around the drivability, around the functionality before they bring it to the market, rather than just doing a conversion. So Ford and Toyota are saying, yeah, if we're going to get into this, I think we need to get into it properly. I think they'll be big sellers.
Mm-hmm. So Ford is entering that segment at the same time with the F-150, and they've done a similar thing to Toyota. So Toyota put 100 cars out on lease to customers for a year. That's just coming up to an end now to study the market. Ford's done a similar thing with the F-150. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see that market. I gather it's a bit of a struggle in New Zealand at the moment, even more so than normal utes. But yeah, I would highly recommend having a look at that market if you are. It is quite an interesting thing there, and that a lot of them aren't actually that good necessarily on the, if you're looking at like that F-150 level, on the towing, on the carrying capability, in the form that they're being landed in and what's being converted. You have to go up to a 2500, and then you're getting into some issues around licensing, that kind of stuff. And so I think if Ford can do something that actually is designed and set up to meet the actual numbers people think they want, then that could be a real winner. And being diesel is going to be a massive aspect as well.
But they will have to go to a heavy license for the 8-ton CV, the 8 tons combined vehicle mass. If they run at 6 tons and under, they can do that on a driver car class 1.
But
they'll need a class 2.
The GVM is still under the line, so it can be driven with a normal license, just not tow with a normal license.
It's not tow.
Correct. But that was my point, that they're marketing 8 tons. That is a class 2 license.
Yes, yeah. Right. MG launches new HS Hybrid Plus ICE and BEV to follow. So this is kind of the vehicle that made the MG brand in New Zealand, and it's now moving into its second generation. The interesting thing here is that it's launching as a hybrid only because they've just noticed how much of the market now is hybrid in New Zealand and Australia. But also the pricing. This is now a $37,000 vehicle, up to $39,990 for the full spec one in hybrid mode. The MG ZS, the petrol one, currently runs around the $25,000 mark. I don't think MG's scared anymore to necessarily be a higher priced vehicle. Now, it's still really good value. It's still cheaper than, say, a Toyota Corolla Cross, which is kind of in the similar vein. But yeah, interesting to see them move up in that price spec. MGA Australia New Zealand Managing Director Peter Chow came to New Zealand for the launch. He's indicated they have a lot more to come. They have, I think, probably another 5 or 6 models to launch with BEV options, hybrid options, petrol options over the next year, including a large SUV. They've indicated they're going into the ute market, so a really big market that MG is about to hit kind of expansion mode. After what they did do, and they pitched was they were going to do very few launches for a year or two while they got their service networks sorted and bedded down, and I guess maybe they think they've hit that level now. Nissan Aria arrives in New Zealand. We're only getting this in New Zealand. Australia's not getting it. It seems to be a Europeanized spec brought to New Zealand. I'm guessing is a little bit of a credits, a carbon credit special, but they've launched that into New Zealand. Three models, all being sold at initially discount pricing. So they have a entry level rear-wheel drive, two-wheel drive 63 kilowatt battery model, 76,990 list, but you can buy it now for 59,990. The second step up listed at 82,990, but 69,990 at the moment, and the top one listed at $108,000. $110,000. You can have it for $89,990 at the moment. So interesting to see brands launching cars on special still at the moment. Is it damaging to the brands, you think?
Yeah. I was just going to say, this is the on, off, on again model for Nissan. But they've obviously had to do some backroom dealing and negotiations to get it here. I think what is worse, Richard, is if you bring it in at a price and then you discount, or existing owners then get peeved because they've just devalued the trade-in value of the vehicle. If you buy it at if you have an introductory price and then it goes up, that's actually better for the owners who get in more quickly. So if you're going to do one or the other, it's better to discount at introduction and then move it off down the track in terms of resale value and treating your customers in a better way.
A commentator, not within the industry, but one of the business commentators made a point. He said New Zealand's EV market right now is effectively liquidation sale pricing. And so one of the issues there is whether the decision to bring the Aria was made 6 months ago or a year ago or a month ago, but surely at the point in time where the button was pushed to say, let's do it here, there's an understanding of just what sort of state our current EV market is in. And the truth of it is, at the launch prices, the recommended retail prices, given the competition, it just wouldn't work. It's actually got to be at those sort of levels, irrespective of whether that's profitable or not, just to get the product into the market and picked up by consumers, because there are some fantastic deals out there for product at the moment. I think the phrase is quite apt, liquidation sale pricing. It cannot last. But on the other hand, you can't necessarily compete in the market right now if you haven't got your pricing in alignment with some of the special deals that are on.
I sense there was an opportunity here, and I wonder if there was an oversupply somewhere else and they got given the opportunity to take these vehicles.
Where are they made? Where are these ones built?
Are made in Japan. Yeah.
Made in Japan?
So, yeah. Well, they're built in Sunderland as well, but yeah. Right. New Zealand tyre industry stalwart John Staples steps down from Bridgestone. Bridgestone New Zealand business director John Staples has announced his retirement. For more than 4 decades with the company, Staples will depart at the end of March next year and will be succeeded by Bridgestone Australia Retail Operations General Manager John Tamblin, who commenced in January. Staples says the timing was right for a changing of the guard as he reflects on his 44-year career with the firm. I'm deeply grateful for the opportunities and support I've received throughout my career at Bridgestone. It's been an honour to lead our New Zealand business and to work with such dedicated teammates and loyal customers. So that's a lot of time to be selling tyres.
Yeah.
So good on John.
Yeah, and he was well respected and well known in the industry as well.
Hyundai hosts Ioniq 9 global premiere in Los Angeles. Hyundai Motor Company unveiled the Ioniq 9 3-row all-electric SUV at the mid-century modern Goldstein House in Los Angeles. Won't delve too much of the story, but this car is crazy. It's kind of a weird, giant, bigger than a Kia EV9 SUV slash people mover. I think you can even turn the second row backwards. Interesting looking vehicle. Go have a dive into that if you feel the need. Staff vote Nissan New Zealand, Australia, New Zealand a great place to work. Nissan Australia and New Zealand have earned the 2024 Great Place to Work certification. The employee-driven accolade recognises Nissan Motor Company Australia and New Zealand, Nissan Financial Services Australia and New Zealand, and the Nissan Casting Australian plant for delivering a rewarding and high trust culture for its employees. There you go. Jaguar, and this has been hilarious. We won't talk about the actual stuff there. Have you guys been watching the stuff online about the Jaguar rebrand?
Oh boy!
Why have we got 2 lowercase letters, 2 uppercase letters, and 2 lowercase letters? I don't.
Oh boy!
and no cat on the car anymore.
Nope.
Yeah.
No, the socials and the memes have been hilarious, but how much of it is true or not, I don't know. But I'd hope for Jaguar's sake they've really thought this one through. I hope they have.
And Sime Darby has also unveiled a new global brand identity from November 15. The 3 businesses operated globally by the publicly listed Malaysian and multinational Sime Darby Berhad will be known as Sime Motors, Sime Industrial, and Sime UMW, which means that Sime Darby New Zealand will be Sime New Zealand. So a bit of a change there for a very legendary long-running company. That was it. We spent 40 minutes on the first story and about a minute each on the others.
Because we were good.
There you guys. Yeah. Right, that is another week of the AutoTalk Weekly Wrap. We'll be back next week, hopefully. I think so. I think we're getting on next Friday. Same time.
I'm in Australia next week,
channel.
but I should be back in one piece by Friday morning. Might be a bit jet lagged, but I'll be there.
And hungover.
Sleep deprived. Don't get in until
This is
1 or
not
something
the
in the
first
morning.
AADA meeting that this podcast has experienced, Graham.
No.
Yeah.
AIMVIA, thank you. Not double ADA.
Envious. Sorry. Wrong one.
Interesting times there, but I can't go into it on the show. But boy, oh boy, Australia is interesting times. It really is.
Yeah.
Put your seatbelt on, lads.
I'm heading off to Taupo for a weekend at a racetrack. We'll catch everyone next week.
See you guys.